Madam Speaker, on the two House amendments to the Senate amendment to H.R. 550, the House also considers the rule on two important amendments to the Senate amendment of H.R. 550. The first amendment, based on Representative Khanna's No War with Iran Act, clarifies that Congress has not authorized military force against Iran and asserts Congress's funding power to enforce the congressional authorization requirements under the War Powers Resolution of 1973. It thus prohibits funds for any military force in or against Iran unless Congress declares war or enacts specific statutory authorization for the use of military force against Iran, or there is a national emergency created by an attack upon the United States or armed forces consistent with the provisions of the War Powers Resolution. The second amendment, based on Representative Barbara Lee's bill, will repeal the 2002 AUMF for the Iraq War against Saddam Hussein, which authorized the President to use the armed forces to the extent he determines to be necessary and appropriate to defend the national security of the United States against the continuing threat posed by Iraq, and enforce all relevant UN Security Council resolutions regarding Iraq. The commanding premise of the 2002 authorization was the need to counter the threat of weapons of mass destruction putatively possessed by Saddam Hussein. But Saddam Hussein actually never had nuclear weapons or other weapons of mass destruction, was driven from office in 2003, and was killed in 2006. The current government in Iraq is a strategic partner of the United States in the struggle against non-state terror groups like ISIS and al-Qaeda, and poses no threat to our national security. The 2002 AUMF does not authorize and has never authorized the use of force against Iran. Yet it was invoked by National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien as a primary source of the administration's authority to engage in military hostilities against Iran, including the strike against Qasem Soleimani. This is one problem with obsolete AUMFs hanging around decades after they were approved. Presidents can treat them like a loaded gun sitting on a table, which can be picked up at will and used in a completely different context for a completely different reason. The 2002 authorization must be repealed to ensure that no president, now or in the future, can use it as a pretextual justification for deploying military force without congressional authorization or a formal declaration of war as called for by the Constitution of the United States. Madam Speaker, the framers gave Congress the power to declare war because they had just had a revolution against the kings and the monarchs who for centuries plunged their populations into wars of vanity, intrigue, political advantage, and distraction of the population. The framers understood that the power over life and death, over war and peace, was far too awesome to vest in one person, much less a political actor motivated by the desire for fame, prestige, and power. By giving Congress the exclusive power to declare war and to appropriate funds for war, the framers made certain that the momentous decision to go to war, to send our troops into battle, would belong primarily to the representatives of the people, both the people who fight and die in our wars, their parents and their families, and the communities that they are drawn from. Over the last month, the President initiated a dramatic escalation of tensions with Iran without the consent of Congress and without consulting Congress pursuant to the War Powers Resolution of 1973. In the case of the strike against Qasem Soleimani, Congress was never consulted by President Trump, although he apparently spoke with several people who were guests of his at Mar-a-Lago, where the decisions were apparently being made. On January 7th, Iran retaliated for the killing of General Soleimani by launching ballistic missiles against our military and coalition forces in Iraq. We now know that at least 34 troops have been diagnosed with traumatic brain injuries from these strikes, injuries the President has dismissed as headaches. We have still yet to receive any legitimate explanation for the justification for the strike in Iraq. And the administration's subsequent briefing on these actions left far more questions than answers and troubled even many Republican senators to the point of extreme frustration. On January 8th, When administration officials briefed members of Congress on the president's actions, both Democrats and Republicans alike expressed grave concerns about the briefing, with one member highlighting the administration had given no time, place, or method justifying the attacks. The president later said there were 4 threats to United States embassies, an explanation which apparently was withdrawn in the aftermath. So we still don't know. In any event, Madam Speaker, we need to return to the Constitution of the United States and the rule of law. The decision, the grave decision to go to war, is one that belongs properly with Congress. And if we can send our sons and daughters into battle and ask them to exercise the most powerful courage in the world to do that, certainly we can exercise and summon up the moral and political courage needed just to properly exercise our constitutional powers. We have the power and we have the duty to declare war when we engage military hostilities abroad, and that's what we are doing with these 2 amendments. I will reserve the remainder of my time.
The gentleman